that's interesting because my whole life I couldn't use my voice, but now I get paid for it.
Welcome, everyone, to the Driving Vision podcast brought to you by the Zeigler Auto Group. And here with me, Auto Group Director of Talent Development, Mike Van Ryn. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks, Sam.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, like it if you do, and leave a comment. Hey, everybody. This week, we bring you back into the Zeigler Auto Group's locker room to hear Rebekah Gregory, hear her story with the Boston Marathon bombing. Not only how she survived, but has thrived since that tragic day. Back with us today, obviously, always Mike Van Ryn, Director of Training and Development. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Sam.
And then our own Araya Daniels. Araya, welcome back.
Thanks, Sam.
So it's fun. Every now and again, we get to have conversations backstage with speakers that have been impactful and meant a lot to the Zeigler Auto Group. And today's guest is one such speaker with an incredible story. So we welcome with us today, Rebekah Gregory. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
So it's exciting to have you because your story is unique. Before we have you share your story, and I love how you started the address to Team Zeigler, which was, I was not running the marathon. I thought that was awesome. I'd love to have you share just a little bit about what was it like for you coming into Team Zeigler? What was your experience with Team Zeigler? You were in our locker room, the place where we learn and we train and we grow together. Rebekah, what was that like?
I don't know what I was expecting, but it went above and beyond. I mean, I think this is definitely one of those speeches that I will remember 10 years from now. I had so much fun with Team Zeigler. You guys have just such a great group, and it really shines through everyone, and it shows how close-knit the company really is. And that's something that I really, truly appreciate. And just every detail that went into this event, and then we had a dinner beforehand. So it was really nice to be able to get to know everyone, and it just made it that much more special. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys very much for having me.
It is interesting because every now and again we'll have a speaker come in and they'll be like, hey, we were asked to come speak to an automotive group. Like we had no idea. Were we talking to a bunch of salespeople? Was it parts? Who was it? Like, what was your thoughts as you came into the locker room to speak to us? What did you think you were getting yourself into that day?
You know, I've been doing this for a little while now. So it used to it was kind of crazy, all the different speeches that I would do. And
yeah.
Learned that automotive groups are really fun people. So I get pumped about that. But the locker room and just everything in general, I thought was amazing. I'm just, even the podcast, the studio room, the speaker series wall. I mean, my picture's on
is
Kalamazoo now. So I had to tell my daughter about that. But just all of the things, the details that go into everything, I was really impressed.
So your story last week on Friday began in the Zeigler locker room by sharing your experience at the Boston Marathon over a decade ago now. And you started it out by sharing you were not there to run, Rebekah. And we all thought that, Mike. In the run-up, we were all sharing that we assumed you were a runner, but you weren't.
That's where it gets everyone every time. So it's fun. I say that I have to disappoint you right off the bat because everyone brings me in as this marathoner, huge, this thing that I trained for. I'm like, no, I was on the sidelines eating chocolate-covered pretzels, wondering why anyone would 2 miles.
And you were there with your son watching. Were you there to support someone or to watch someone in particular, or were you just there to have the experience?
So I was there to support a friend, and it was my 26th birthday weekend, my first time ever in the city of Boston. I was living in Texas at the time. And so I just thought it would be fun to come up to Boston for the weekend and bring my 5-year-old son along with me. And we were all packed up and ready to go home as soon as the marathon concluded on that Monday. And we just so happened to be less than 3 feet away from the first bomb that went off.
Which as a mom is terrifying, which as a parent is terrifying, which as a human being is terrifying. And you described and shared with us those first moments in the locker room and how you ultimately went on to survive. And one of the elements I wrote down as a note is the importance of being present. Talk to us a little bit about being present as it relates to that experience.
For so long in my life, I used the term surviving because
Yeah.
we get so caught up in what we're supposed to do day in and day out in this routine that we established for ourselves early on, whether it be in our career or our family. And so we kind of get lost in that without even realizing it. And for 26 years, that was very much my life. And especially in adulthood, I was a single mom. I thought the more success that I could bring to myself, the more money I make, all of those different things and the factors, the better person I would be overall. And it wasn't until a bomb completely shattered my world that I realized I had it so wrong. And for 26 years of my life, I took it all for granted, and I expected to get out of bed and put 2 feet on the ground and go about my day. And I said it typically meant hitting the snooze button about 13 different times because I was running late and just constantly chaotic. And so, being present, I was never present. I don't think one moment. And that's it's sad to say that, but it's something that we all realize and understand because our lives are so busy. Society expects us to be so busy that unless something big happens to you where you really are just knocked completely off of everything you've ever known, then you don't stop and realize anything that's happening. And so I was surviving my life and I wasn't living it. And when I woke up in that hospital room, I didn't know what was ahead of me. I didn't know what I was going to be able to do to put the pieces back together. I just knew that I had a life to put back together, and that's what I was going to focus on.
I love that note. Everybody talks about be present. We hear that throughout our lives, be present, and yet to actually do it is so tough. You talk about an hour of power that helps you kind of focus daily as a strategy to do just that. We don't need to go through the terrible experience you've had, although we're going to talk about that in a minute. I love one of these quotes. There were so many great quotes in here, but we don't have to go through that terrible experience. Araya, you share with us daily your version of an hour of power, which is exercise, right? How does what you do every morning, Araya, in your routine help you to become present? And then Mike, what's something you do to be present?
Yeah. And I'll piggyback on Rebekah's, her hour power morning that you set aside for yourself. And you talked about that on Friday about just doing what you can to take time for yourself before you have to pour into everyone else. And before we get in that monotonous of being busy, right? Like taking care of us first so that we can be fully present in everyone else's life. And that's something I practice daily. I have for the last 4 years. I kind of had a little bit of a mindset shift and decided that I needed to do what I could to take care of myself. And one of the biggest reasons I do that is because when I work out, I feel like it's my way of proving myself that I can do hard things and then that I can conquer and take on whatever the week holds. Right.
Yeah.
So fitness is just an outlet and a way to show yourself that you can do hard things. And so I've always really appreciated that morning routine of moving my body, getting my mind right, doing a little bit of gratitude, spending some time meditating in prayer. And that's how I start every single morning. And I know on the days that if I skip it, I'm a totally different person. So that is definitely an important thing to me.
What brought you to that, Araya? So Rebekah was brought there by the tragedy of the marathon, right? And you shared that with us. So Rebekah, after today's podcast, we're going to hear comments from Team Zeigler. This idea of being present was a consistent theme throughout Team Zeigler. It is so tough for us as humans to be present. What brought you to that, Araya? Why did you decide that was important?
I can't say that I was blown up by a bomb, but I did.
No, I wasn't either. None of us were, except Rebekah. There's only one person on this call that gets that distinction.
Yeah. So 4 years ago, I went through, I have degenerative disc disease in my spine, and I had herniated 3 different discs in my neck, and I had suffered 8 months of complete dizziness, went through therapy. One of my discs was impinging on my spinal cord and just causing the most just strange things that were happening to me. So going through that, I was living in such a state of anxiety and fear, and was really driven by that for a very long time. And finally, just going through that, realizing I never wanted to return back to that mindset and really just live every day as best as I could. I was really in a state that was not wonderful, and it's something that I never want to return to. So fitness really became such my outlet to really channel that and be a more positive, vibrant person.
So I love that, Araya, because that's doing a difficult thing. That's a challenge. And Rebekah, you shared a great quote with us. You said, shying away from challenges gives us an inaccurate measure of our strength. I want to put that actually up on my wall behind me here, because so often we wish all the ease on our kids and friends and those around us. And in our own lives, we seek a measure of ease, but shying away from that, what do you mean by that gives us an inaccurate measure of our strength?
We don't know what we're fully capable of until we are like what Araya was talking about and what I'm talking about. I say the majority of us won't get blown up by a bomb in a marathon, but every single person knows what it's like to have life blow up in their face. And that right there is exactly why, our challenges are what really show us how much courage and bravery that we have and strength that we have. If we're not knocked down a few pegs and we're on top of the world all the time, then we don't realize how much strength you gain just from going through things and how much appreciation that you have for that. I mean, I think that's absolutely beautiful, Araya, what you were talking about. And exercise is a huge thing for me too, because like you said, it's something that's hard. You don't want to go to the gym. You have to get into this routine where you're like, I'm going to do this irregardless of how I feel. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to lift heavy things and I'm going to get on my Peloton when my leg is killing me because I can. And then the after effects of it is you feel great. You're energized. You have all of these different advantages. So that right there describes that quote.
Well, and I really love the tie-in to what you also mentioned on Friday. And I've always believed this and loved this, that our brains are built on survival. So whatever is a state of comfort for us is like our safe, our safe place. And so getting out of that, what is so innate into us as humans is to constantly be in a state of comfort to protect us. And we're just like, what can I do daily to like shatter that? Like, what can I do to get myself out of that state of comfort, to know that I can handle hard things? And then that just pool into every aspect of my life. I've just always believed that. So love that piece.
So Rebekah, adversity is beneficial. It's a positive. Having been blown up at a marathon, like, do you ask for it? How do you implement that into your life so that you continue to have that growth? I mean, since the marathon, you've had multiple strategies. You've had continued adversity. Do you go out looking for it, or do you just have a mindset in the way you meet it?
Adversity has always been a part of my life. I touched on 6 months before Boston, I got held up in a Walmart parking lot and robbed at gunpoint. I thought that was going to be the biggest highlight. I grew up in a very abusive household, and so there's trauma has always been there. And I feel like I learned at an early age. I either do this, I either get through it, or I'm just going to sink. I'm going to drown because I can't handle everything that life is throwing at me. But I look back at all the adversity and I see where I am now. And I see that it's kind of, in a way, prepared me for what we're doing. We have our foundation, Rebekah's Angels, that provides trauma therapy to children and families across the country. And I could not relate to those families. I couldn't be in the position that I am if I didn't go through all of these things myself. If I didn't, it would just be an organization. But it's not. It's our heart and our soul, because it was built on our very worst chapters.
How does giving back contribute to what you're doing and your growth?
Giving back is necessary in order for us to really become the best versions of ourselves. I truly believe that. And that day could have looked a lot different for me if the wonderful people that decided to step in and help us didn't help. So I look back and I see my bones laying next to me on the sidewalk, and my body's on fire, and I'm in a pool of my own blood, and there's nails and bobbers and BBs and everything that these brothers packed into these pressure cooker bombs. But I also see all of the people that were surrounding us, innocent civilians, people who had just run 26.2 miles that can barely walk, are getting us off the street into a nearby trauma hospital. And so my mom told me, and I said this too in my speech, that it would be a huge disservice to those people if I gave up because they saved me. And it would be a disservice to not pay that forward, because now we have this responsibility to do that. We've seen an act of love that stretches so far, and millions of people around the world helping us and supporting us. So we're trying to give that back in the best way we know how.
So there's almost two sides of the scale with what you've been through, right? There's the evil that exists in the world that's real, that did this terrible thing. And there's the good that exists on the other side that saved you. In the balance of those two, like, what do you see more of? And is that a choice to see one or the other? Or do you believe in humanity? Or are you frustrated with humanity?
I believe that you can be both. I believe that you can be so frustrated at humanity, but still believe that there's far more good in the world than there is bad. And that's kind of where I'm at. You can always focus on the good, or you can always focus on the bad. It's our choice every day that we wake up. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to have that adversity, those challenges, those, mindset shifts throughout the day as things happen. But when we feel so excited, so revved up to begin our day, to hug our families, to love on our friends, to go out and make the world better, to be the best that we can be in our career, to support our colleagues, all of these different things. At the end of it, that there is so much more good. You see it, but you have to look for the blessings and not the problems.
So that's just a really good glimpse into Rebekah Gregory, right? And your mindset, your perspective, and by the way, your sense of humor as well. So I just love that. And you said on Friday, you said you felt unbelievable joy and gratitude for being alive. And how could you share maybe some of that with our listeners? What are things they can do to maybe shift their mindset and focus on gratitude? Because I had gratitude highlighted like a ton of times from your presentation.
Well, I mean, I know that we talked about in the morning, because the morning is the first time we wake up and we're either like hitting our snooze button like I used to and saying, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't have all of this stuff going on today. Or we can spend a little bit more time. Maybe it's hitting our snooze button a little bit less, or waking up just a little bit early. And I know at first it's hard to do because our routine, and anytime we break it, it's going to be tough. But when you do spend those extra few minutes just for yourself, doing what brings your heart joy, becoming grounded, whether you do a gratitude practice or meditate or prayer, whatever it may be, then you're more focused on what you're going to bring to the day rather than the day taking over you. And so first thing in the morning is super important. And it's just having those things in your life that you know why you're fighting. I mean, every day I get up and I put my prosthetic leg on because I have two children that I want to teach not to live in fear of what's going to happen to them. I want them to know that they are going to be faced with challenges, but life can still be so beautiful. And so I remember that. And I say that I don't want evil to win. I have that written across my mirror because that is my main goal. Every day that I wake up, I can choose to let evil win, or I can choose to not let it win. And nowhere in this whole thing do I ever want evil to take over. And it won't. I'll continue fighting.
In fact, one of the great quotes of last week was, on the other side of fear, you will be unstoppable. And we had another speaker, Damon West, that said, on the other side of adversity, we meet the better version of ourselves. And I love how the interplay of those two, right? On the other side of adversity, we meet the better version of ourselves. The better version of ourselves is, as we sink fear, as we eliminate fear from our lives, we can achieve and accomplish anything, right, Rebekah?
We really can. I look back at the things that have happened in the last several years. Never did I think that I would take up running. I mean, I was, like I said, on the sidelines eating chocolate covered pretzels, but I really fell in love with it. I never thought I would confront the bomber in federal court. I never thought I would have a foundation. I didn't know the first thing about running a nonprofit. I mean, there's just so many different avenues that if I would have allowed fear to stop me, I wouldn't be at this point. And that doesn't mean that fear has never stopped me, because of course there's going to be times where we do get scared, but I do believe that on the other side of whatever we're facing, we really could be and will be unstoppable if we just allow ourselves to go for it.
So Mike and Araya often in our training sessions across the Zeigler Auto Group will talk about how we all have roles in our life. We have different labels we put on ourselves. So we're employees at moments. We're family members. We're a son, we're a daughter, we're a husband, a wife, whatever. One label you refuse to accept in this scenario, and I was fascinated by this, was victim. Would you just share the story of you going to court? Because I heard you describe that, and I felt so much power in your ability to declare what you declared. Would you share that with us?
I still can't believe that it happened. It's one of those moments that feel like
it's a movie. It's like it was written for a movie.
Yeah, it really is. But I was asked to go to Boston, and at first I had to testify in front of the remaining bomber. And I had to kind of rehash everything that had happened to me and my son and where we were. I had to circle on the screen, as a matter of fact, the scene. It was a scene of the bombing, and I had to circle where I was and where my little kid was. And I had to hear his screams because it's caught on a recording where you can hear "mommy, mommy, mommy," and son screaming out. And it was just one of the most scariest, terrifying things that I've ever lived through. But heartbreaking to hear your son, yes, and his voice in that moment. And you also mentioned this person, his approach to you all was very sarcastic, maybe. Is that a good way to put it? That's a great way to put it. In fact, he was flipping off the camera in his prison cell while he was awaiting trial. So I felt like he had no remorse. I mean, he was leaning back in his chair, cracking jokes with his attorney, not acknowledging the jury by standing up on the first day of the trial. So here's this guy who has just caused this horrific amount of terror and havoc, and he's proud of it. And so I gave my testimony, but then I was asked to go back to Boston and give what's called a victim impact statement. And I joked that I had to look up what a victim impact statement was because I've never been part of a federal trial before. And it's a statement that's made before the judge and the jury make their final decision. And so I just didn't want to give this guy any more satisfaction for what he had done. And I turned in my statement to the U.S. attorney, and it made me go last. And I was up there in my Boston strong blue and yellow colors. And I looked him in the eyes for the first time. And I was explaining to Mike after the speech, usually you can feel someone's compassion in just their eyes. You can see their life story almost. And you see the love and all of the different emotions. And this was completely different. His eyes were like coal black. I mean, he was just evil. And there's no other word to describe it. It was looking at pure evil. But my voice never wavered. My eyes locked with his for the first time. And I said, I was asked to give a victim impact statement today, but in order to do that, I would have to be someone's victim. And I'm not yours, and I'm not your brother's. And I went on to say that one act of hate that stretches a couple of 100 feet, we've seen an act of love that stretches hundreds of thousands of miles, and no one is going to remember their names. What they're going to remember is what each and every victim's family and survivor has gone on to accomplish in spite of this tragedy. And so then I gave a little sarcastic smirk and said, how's that for your victim? And it was like a chapter of my life was just like, and now moving on.
What happened in the courtroom in that moment when you said that? It
was crazy. Everyone in the courtroom, nobody could do anything.
Yeah.
Overflow room, and everybody like floated.
That's awesome.
And there was a U.S. Marshal that came up to me afterwards and gave me his pen. And he said, no, he's like, I don't want to speak to a lady like this, but you just made that guy your friend.
Yes. That's awesome. Had you planned to say that, or did that kind of come in the moment? Where did that come from? That's such great righteous indignation. Like you had every right to say that, yet nobody's probably said it quite like that.
That came from years of abuse. That came from a little girl who was never allowed to say anything. I couldn't cry. I would get eaten if I shed a tear. There was so much that came from that didn't have anything to do with the bombing. And when I looked at that guy and the biggest enemy, it was like I was looking at every single person that tried to fail me in my life or tell me that I wasn't good enough or anything else, saying, you're not going to win and you never will. And I told him, I said, you tried to take my life, but instead you really ended up saving it, because I would never live like I did again. Not because I tried to take things for granted, not because I was a bad person or anything like that. It was just that I was so caught up in surviving that I wasn't living any of my days.
So my next question is going to be tough because I don't know exactly how to ask it. Maybe Araya, Mike, you guys can jump in, but I'm touched deeply by what you just said. You found a voice for all the abuse, all the challenges that you'd experienced in your life up to that moment. And you spoke that voice and you had power in that moment. Not everyone will go through a marathon bombing, but there are so many people listening to us today that can empathize with what you've experienced, that are probably in a place that's very similar to where you are today. What advice, as you speak to them through this podcast and through this speaker series that you do, how can someone claim that voice in the way you did without going through what you've gone through?
I think there's so many things that we can speak onto that, but part of the biggest is just believing that you can.
Yeah.
For so long, I was told that I didn't have a voice, that my voice didn't matter. And so when you're told that all your life, then you believe that, even though it was the furthest thing from the truth. And I was thinking about it the other day. My dad or my biological father was really good about telling me that how much I didn't matter and how much I couldn't use my voice ever. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because my whole life I couldn't use my voice, but now I get paid for it. So
yeah, exactly.
it's kind of like in your face,
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
you took the very thing that appeared to you at that moment to be your weakness, which it wasn't. It was a lie. And you turned that into massive strength, right?
And anybody can. It's not me. It's just that belief that you can.
And not to diminish your experience, but putting it into the business world. We hear all the time in business, you can't do this. You shouldn't be able to do it. You don't have the right title. You don't have the right position. You're not in the right place. And we talk all the time at Team Zeigler about finding that voice. Araya, you've recently done that with the call you did last week.
Yeah, and I have to back up because I feel like I'd be lying if I said I wasn't getting a little bit choked up just listening to that. Rebekah, your story and just like thinking of yourself and growing up in the situation that you did and having so much of that trauma, I resonate a little bit with that, and not completely at that level, but I understand exactly. And I always take that and I'm just like, okay, what can I do with this to make it better? And you said something on Friday that I have to share because I quoted it and highlighted it. We can allow people to steal our joy, or we can radiate our energy to others. Oh, and that's a choice. That is a choice of being the victim or the survivor, right? And I just think that's so powerful. But I've been on such a mission lately, and one to give a voice, not to just women, which is what Sam's alluding to, but just to everyone, right? Like we all have faced certain trials and tribulations that have shaped us.
So I am talking about for women, as we talked about your call last week, but I think this is broad, right? We've all been diminished. Our voices have have at some point or another all been silenced, right?
Absolutely. So that's so powerful. And to hear you talk about that, like that's something that comes internal, right? Like that's something that you take and harness to do good with. And I think that is a choice, right? Like that's a choice for people to decide what you're going to do, if you're going to be the victim or if you're going to come out and be the victor of whatever your circumstances are. So I love that. I love that piece to that for sure.
Mike, thoughts about that and claiming your voice?
Yeah, actually the word I wrote down is Rebekah, is courage, right? It takes immense amount of courage, but once you find that, things can really change for you. And also knowing that maybe you're going through a situation, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Just knowing that you're not alone and there's some support out there as well. So it ties in very nicely.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, just by this conversation alone, Araya felt like she could relate because she is resonating with certain things. And I don't even have to know what those things are to know that, some things touch. And that's what we can all do. And it's like the most vulnerable we are. And I'm not talking about just women either. I mean, men have grown up for so long to show that no emotions can be had, because that is a big no-no. But it's crazy when you think about it, because it's like if you don't if you don't learn to express emotion, then how can you connect with anyone?
Yeah.
The person that you're married to or with, your family, your friends, your colleagues. I mean, there is not a person in this world that you cannot have a connection with if it's not emotional. So we have to break down that barrier, and we have to say everyone has gone through something, and we all have the ability to allow people to learn from us and us learn from them. And it's really beautiful when you look at it like that.
It's beautiful and it's simple, but doggone it, it's not easy. I wish it were easy, Rebekah.
I know. Me too.
Being vulnerable and the emotional piece, it's not easy. So you go on to talk about how are you, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about, I specifically wrote down, how are you showing up? How are you being present? How are you connecting? How are you being vulnerable? And then you listed different components or areas of our life with family, with colleagues, with clients, with ourselves. And you put ourselves last, and maybe intentionally.
Very intentional, because that's what we do. We look at every single thing, every person that's more important, and we save whatever we have left, which is usually nothing. We're on negative at this point. Yep. And then we wonder why we feel like we do, why we're unfulfilled, why we're exhausted, why we're sad, why we're depressed, why we're all of these different things. And it's because we can never show up as our best version if we're not pouring into ourselves at all. I mean, there's some, if you have, okay, let me do this. So the question is, what have you done right now, today, to bring yourself joy?
Oh no, is this a question for me? I'm going to tell you, I've medicated with caffeine. That's about all I've done so far today. And it's 3:00 in the afternoon. No, it's a lot of caffeine, but to your point, that's probably not good. Araya, what have you done?
I was just going to say that's not enough self-love. I don't think a bang is going to fix your...
But I am going to do yoga this afternoon. So interesting enough, when you think about like being intentional and kind of your hour of power in that place, like I'm almost 50. It's bizarre. Like I made fun of people 20 years ago for yoga. Like I think it's the most ludicrous, crazy sounding thing. I love it. I find Zen, right? Like
actually,
you get to be,
both you and Mike are yogis. So.
Yeah, you get to be strong. You get to be powerful. So that's my answer. Mike, what's yours?
Yeah, I've not accomplished that today. However, I did practice gratitude this morning, and I have written some notes to others.
Nice.
Zeigler.
Nice diamond drops. What was yours? Or
my workout for sure.
Yeah.
It's my morning routine. Yep.
All right. So now we're going to take it a step further. What have you done minus working out? What have you done that's brought yourself joy today?
Ooh.
If it takes longer than 5 seconds to answer that, then you are in survival mode and not living.
Ooh. So wait, Rebekah, give us your example. What have you done?
That's a tough one.
Because I can't think of one. I don't think I've done anything.
You might have, and you haven't realized it, but you've got to be intentional about it. And that's the biggest thing. Intentionality is crucial to building the life that you love. And that's ultimately what you want to do, right? You want to love your life. Yes, you're going to have all this kind of stuff that happens, and it's not going to be fair for the most part. And we're going to have all of these things that knock us off our feet. Yeah. But when you're so grounded and you know exactly who you are and you know why you're living, what you're living for,
wow,
it's a lot easier for us to deal with these obstacles.
Will you give us some examples of some things that we might do for ourselves that would do that? And then I'd love to transition into the story of what you learned from that speaker all those years ago, or whenever it was before you did your big event. But what are some things that would count as what you're talking about?
They don't have to be big. No, every day, my husband and I, after the hour of power, before our day kind of begins, we sit down and we have coffee together. And that is something that I enjoy every morning. And usually he makes it for me, which is even better because he makes great coffee.
That's awesome.
But that's how we connect. And I know that we have that time in our day before everything else starts. So that's a simple thing, and it takes 15 minutes. But I know that it fills my cup, fills his cup up, and that's something. Even reading a book, I read 3 chapters of my new book today, and I'm super excited about it. So I'm not talking about these big lavish things that we have to do. It's just as long as we do something that just makes us happy for no other reason than it makes us happy.
I'll back up and say a lot of what, and it's funny because intentional is my word of the year. So that keeps coming up in a lot of things.
That's awesome.
5 months of the year. Crazy. But I'm a big social media person. I love posting, and the more that I can share my journey, and the more I communicate and connect with others who might not, have someone that they feel like they can, talk to or whatever. I think that is definitely a cup filler for me, for sure, is being able to just share that and connect with others on a level like that. That's something that I've done today.
I think that's awesome.
That's awesome. Okay. So Rebekah, you were at a seminar with another speaker who's great at executing and doing and getting things done. And you asked him a question that led you to a journey. Tell us a little bit about that. I think when we think about doing things for ourselves, this is kind of a great way to transition into that last moment.
You never know who you're going to meet that's just really going to inspire you that day. And I was at a conference. I had flown there. It took me about 26 hours to get to this northern part of Canada that I was in. I was in a wheelchair. I had my dear friend with me, and I was just completely exhausted. And to be honest, I didn't really want to go. And I felt really bad after, because I always, if I'm not feeling like something, then when I go and I meet all these incredible people, that I'm like, oh, why did I ever feel like that? That's crazy. But it was just physically, I was spent. And I went to my speech, and I was able to listen to this guy named Brian Keating after. And he traveled all over the world, and he worked with a lot of amazing animals. And I was just so inspired by what he was talking about, because I have a daughter who just turned 8, and she's really fascinated by animals. And so I wanted to get her more involved in some different things that we had going on in our community. And then also just the traveling aspect, because our family likes to travel. We've done a couple of big trips, but we kind of wanted to do more. And I'm not sure how I still look back and I'm like, wow, that was wild. But when I asked him, I said, how did you get started with this, like going on these travels and doing the tour guide bit and the animals? And he said, one day I just decided that this is what I wanted to do. And so I did it. And I was like, oh my gosh. I'm just one of those moments that you're like, yes, that is what I want to do. And so what that led to is me taking my long flight home, concocting this huge idea in my head that I was going to present to my husband. And I told him that when I was able to walk again, because at the time I was still recovering from my surgery, I said, I really want to travel the world. I want to pull our kids out of school. We can do this for right now. He left his company to take care of me. While I said, before you go back to work, before life gets crazy again, let's take these several months and let's travel the world. And that's exactly what we did. And so just that line of what he said, that lunch with him, was like, it changed my life last year.
Again, simple, but not easy, right? Simple, but not easy. What was one of the most memorable experiences from that trip for you?
Well, a memorable experience is my husband getting dengue fever a week into our Bali, Indonesia trip. We ended up in the hospital there. That was not fun. The doctor said he had about 48 hours where if he made it through there, we were going to be okay. And so that was, I didn't want to add that to the roster of traumas, but here we are.
Yeah.
But there was one particular moment where we were on this beautiful hill in Switzerland, and we were looking out at the mountains, and there were these bald eagles flying over this water, and it was so still and so quiet, and it was just our family. And it was, I get chills talking about it, because it was one of those moments that I was just there. I was so present. I was so just, everything that was going on around me, that's what I was doing. And I don't have any pictures or anything from it, because I was so invested with where I was. I like to say, be where your feet are, right? Because so often we're like into the next thing and we're not where our feet are at that moment. And that's a memory that I will just never forget. And it was so simple, but it was just beautiful. I keep saying beautiful. I like that word.
That's a good word. That's a good word. Well, We absolutely appreciate the time that you spent with us both last week and the time spent today. Mike, I know you've got some information you want to share about Rebekah.
Well, Rebekah, if people want to follow you, find out more about you, your book, your foundation, can you share us that information?
Sure. So our foundation is called Rebekah's Angels Foundation. You can look us up. It's Rebekah's Angels on social media. We're most active on Facebook. And then our website is rebekahsangels.org. And we can help anyone across the country. We set people up to a therapist near them, and we fund therapy for however long they need. So it's been just an incredible thing to see all the families being healed. And then my social media is Rebekah M. Gregory, and I make terrible leg jokes and try to.
They are so funny.
People know that they're not alone. Oh yes, and I have a book. Thank you, Mike. You're way better at this promotion stuff. Taking my life back.
Awesome. Well, Rebekah Gregory, we want to thank you. We also want to recognize you for the person that you are, the heart that you have, taking a horrible, horrible tragedy and turning that into an opportunity to help people across the globe. We thank you for everything you've done to invest with Team Zeigler.
Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Rebekah.
My greatest takeaway today from Rebekah Gregory is the fact that every day we have a choice. And we can get mired in our negativity, and we can pull into ourselves, and we can get lost or overcome by our challenges. Or we can pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, start the day, do our best, take on those challenges and do everything we can to succeed that day. And my gosh, if we can take it one step farther and make a positive out of our negative and make success out of our challenges, we are truly seizing the day and we are truly living life. On that note, based on what she's been through, every day is a gift, and every day we have to wake up and we get to go to work, be positive, have a successful day, share something wonderful with someone. That's a gift, and we forget that. So we need to remember that one every single day.
Wow, Rebekah was such an inspiration. I have a whole page full of notes, but what pops out at me is take an hour of power every morning for yourself. And also, on the other side of fear, you will be unstoppable. So I got so much out of it, a whole page full of notes, and those are the two things that kind of keep resonating.
Hi, this is Tracy Brubaker with the recruiting team. And I just wanted to say that today, listening to Rebekah and all that she's been through and her positive attitude of looking at life and realizing that she's blessed to be the survivor that she is, it just makes you put everything in perspective to when you think you're having a bad day and how easy our lives are and just how mindset is everything. So I just really enjoyed it. I was very uplifted and inspired by her story and touched, of course, many tears in the room. And I just appreciate the fact that Zeigler does these incredible series that help us to grow and expand our thoughts and ourselves. I can't wait to read her book.
Hi, this is Brian Koster from the Orland Park campuses, and I'd like to take a moment and share a few takeaways from today's guest speaker, Rebekah Gregory. The first one was she's a survivor, not a victim, and that she kept her humor during a horrific time in her life, specifically writing on her leg, "It's not you, it's me." Also showing courage in the face of adversity and turning it into a positivity. She was positive during every bit and every step of everything she went through. Going to the exact point of the terrorist bombing to create new memories with her son and new family showed that she is unstoppable on the other side, as she promised to herself. She said that the most beautiful parts of life come from the most broken places. She is a true example of staying positive through life's trials. It was a great story for all of us to hear today, just to show us the positivity that we can bring to each other's lives. Have a great day, Team Zeigler.
A special thanks to all who contributed to this week's podcast. Until next week, how are you driving vision today?